Hi, welcome to a little soapbox video on this channel that I really just want to pick apart some things I've seen online. There seems to be a lot of discourse about the reveal of God of War Ragnarok. And although a lot of people are excited and some people are maybe ambivalent, maybe they liked the original God of War but didn't love it, and so the reaction to the sequel is, oh, that's nice, but it's not for me. That's perfectly fine. The reaction I find really, really odd is a very small but vocal minority who really looked at that game, seen the trailer, and started screaming about the fact that it reuses animations, that it doesn't show a marked step up on the previous game. It isn't really a true sequel. Well, I get it that, we're in a new console hardware generation and people are saying, why is this not looking significantly better? It actually does look a little bit better. It clearly runs more smoothly. And the other thing I'd say is when the trailer was initially shown, it was clearly compressed. So there are issues there. The other thing to say is, though, on the PS4, God of War was one of the best looking games out there. There's not that much visual improvement you can do in terms of the materials. When you look at the God of War Ragnarok trailer, one of the really things that stands out to me is there's more stuff on screen. There's more things happening a lot of the time. So the individual assets, the step up in quality might not be that big, but in terms of the amount of stuff it's throwing at you, that's where the PlayStation 5 has parked its horse. But I'm not here to defend Sony. The whole argument that reuse of assets means this isn't a true sequel, it should just be downloadable content or an expansion pack. Oh, if you honestly believe that reuse of assets means that something isn't a sequel, then you are just proving that you do not understand video games. And that's fine. If you don't care about the design process and what goes on behind the scenes, that's fine. But this really isn't something you should be shouting about. But the other concern, and the thing that I've seen a few people nervous about, is that Cory Barlog has stepped down as being the game director. And he was so instrumental in the God of War. It's not a reboot. It feels like a reboot, but honestly it's a reimagination. It's a continuation of what came before. This is one series that clearly has a through line from start to beginning. But Cory Barlog was so involved in that game and so vocal about this is his vision of the way he reimagined Kratos, that the fact that he's no longer the game director and we've got this newcomer, Eric Williams, stepping in, some people are using that as a mark of concern, saying, oh, without Cory at the helm, I don't think I trust this. So I just want to look at Santa Monica Studios and try and say why, for me, that itself is not something I'm even remotely concerned about. And to try and explain that, I want to point at the entirety of the God of War series. So the original series was created at Santa Monica Studios by a man called David Jaffa. Now he's famous for also having been the creator of the Twisted Metal franchise, which for any long-term Sony fans will be a series they'll know quite intimately. So David served as the game director on the original God of War, but he stepped down from that position for God of War 2 and just became the creative director. So he had some oversight of it. He gave input and said, oh, I think you should do this, I think you should do that, but he was not the director. He was not the person making decisions. This goes here, this goes there, this is the order you do things. He just looked at the overall package and gave feedback on how it was feeling. The director of God of War 2 was our favourite, Cory Barlog, and he was a good person to step up to be the game director because he had been the lead animator on the original God of War. So with David Jaffa stepping down, Cory stepped in. He had already worked on the franchise, he knew it well, and he went from lead animator to game director. For the third game, however, Cory departed Santa Monica Studios. He actually left, planning to go and join Crystal Dynamics to work briefly on the Tomb Raider reboot over there. So he provided initial design and some story concepts for God of War 3, but the game was directed by a man called Stig Asmussen. Now Stig Asmussen, again, new director each game. He had been the lead environmental artist on the original game, and then he'd stepped up to the plate to be the art director on God of War 2. So we have a trilogy, 3 entries. Each game has a unique director, one person at the helm who's got a vision for what that game is and is ultimately making all the decisions. Stig Asmussen left Santa Monica Studios after God of War 3. He wasn't involved in the franchise after that. He actually left to go and join Respawn Entertainment, and he directed Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which for a lot of people is a game that restored their faith in Electronic Arts as a publisher. They can do single first-person games, and they brought the director of one of the best single first-person games, in existence in the PlayStation 3 era, forwards to direct that for them. So that shows some real investment and talent. So, after God of War 3, that really did appear to be a definitive end to Kratos' story. Santa Monica Studios' next God of War game, there were some spin-offs, but I'm not going to go into them because they're not actually developed in-house at the same studio. But the next God of War game was decided to be a prequel. This was God of War Ascension. And a man called Todd Papy was brought in to be the game director of that game. Now again, Todd Papy knew the series intimately. He'd been the game designer on the first 3 God of War games, and then the game director of God of War Ascension. So again, this is bringing someone else from the team who knows the franchise to step up to the plate and give their vision of what they think the next God of War game should be. He doesn't appear to have many video game credits to his name after God of War Ascension. He was credited for additional development support of the reboot, which is when Cory Barlog came back in to serve as game director and story writer. And that game was fantastic. All the games, actually, in my view, are fantastic. But that reboot really caught people by surprise on just how fresh a take it was on the series. So Cory Barlog has announced publicly, although he actually did let this slip, but it wasn't official until recently. He let it slip a while ago that he's not necessarily in charge. He's actually now the producer of God of War Ragnarok. The man who's directing it is Eric Williams. Eric and Cory Barlog have been working together for over a decade at this point, because Eric Williams was the game designer of the original God of War, lead game designer of God of War 2, design support of God of War 3, provided combat design on God of War Ascension, and credited for giving additional design work on the reboot God of War. So again, this is a new person brought up from within the team, said, okay, it's your turn to take the plate. You give the vision of what this game should be. And that's really, I admire Santa Monica Studios for doing this. It means every game has a chance to be unique. It has a chance to offer a new insight. A sequel isn't just the same done again. A sequel should bring something new to the table, and by having a new game director in each case, they actually improve the chances of it feeling fresh. It does, I admit, come with risk. It isn't a risk-free scenario, but the benefits are incredible, and God of War isn't the first series to do this even remotely. Let me just point at another very famous video game series that, kind of like God of War, it has only intermittent games but have been spread out over a long period of time. This is Sid Meier's Civilization. The role of game designer in this strategy game is an extremely important one. You need one person to actually look at all of the mechanics of the game and the way they fit together and say, well, this is the way that this strategy game will play out. And in the original game, that was clearly Sid Meier, with assistance from Bruce Shelley. But Sid Meier was hardly involved in Civilization 2. That was designed by Brian Reynolds, Douglas Caspian Kaufman, and Jeff Briggs. That trio of people, led by Brian Reynolds, put together Civilization 2. And then by the time you get to Civilization 3, Brian Reynolds and Douglas Caspian Kaufman have stepped down, leaving Jeff Briggs assisted by Soren Johnson to design Civilization 3. When it eventually came out, Civilization 4, Jeff Briggs was no longer the game designer. This was Soren Johnson's sole effort as the designer of that game. But by the time Civilization 5 came around, he's gone and you've got this new team of John Schaefer, Ed Beach and Scott Lewis. And then Civilization 6, the most recent game in the series, John Schaefer and Scott Lewis have stepped down, meaning Ed Beach gets to give his unique take of what he would do as the sole game designer. Every game in the Civilization series feels unique, it feels fresh, and it's a good thing. That series has been really well regarded, and it means the sequel is always more than just the same done again. Reuse of assets is nothing to scream about. There's reuse of assets everywhere. What's important is knowing what the important things to change are. And with Cory Barlog having stepped down, but still being involved, he, as producer, has worked with Eric Williams. He said he's given him notes on the things he expects to happen, the core notes. He says he's told Eric Williams what he set up, and I think he's given in an interview that he considers 3 tenets of the proposed story as inviolate, as these 3 things must happen, but everything around them and all of the details are yours. It's hard to tell what's going to happen from here, but it looks like they are thinking of God of War. They've said this will be the last game of the Norse era. No more Vikings after this game. It does look like they might be looking to the future and what other deific pantheons Kratos could slaughter next. And I'm really excited.